Hi everyone, my name is Chris, and welcome to myboardgameguides.com. Today I'll be doing a basic guide on how to play Hive, or as I like to call it, insect chess. And you'll find out why in a minute. Okay, so here are the pieces for Hive. And as you'll notice, there are many different types of insects that are on the board. But for the purposes of this game, the most important insect are the queen bees, because these two pieces basically determine who will win. This is kind of like the king in chess. And the way checkmate, for the lack of a better word, is accomplished is if the queen bee is surrounded on all six sides by other insects. So let's say this is black, and black is surrounded by all of white's insects on six sides. If this happens, black will lose. And it doesn't necessarily have to be all the insects of the opponent's color. If the black queen bee is surrounded like this, then black will lose, because black is surrounded on all sides by insects. Doesn't have to be the opponent's insects, it can even be all of black's insects. That would cause black to lose. So, when you look at it, positioning in this game becomes very important. So how do you achieve the offensive positioning needed to win in Hive? Well, first of all, the game starts off by one person placing down an insect. Whoever goes first places down their first insect. Then the next player places down an insect. And then the first player, let's say he's black, can put in another insect. And then white can respond by putting in another insect, and so on. But the thing is, the insects cannot move until until that side has placed their queen bee. So let's say black places their queen bee, like so. Well, now black, on the next turn, black can move his insects, or her insects. And let's say white places her queen bee. Well, now on the next turn, white can move their insects. And the big rule when you're moving insects is that the insects have to be able to slide into a square if it's a insect that requires sliding movement. So let's say this is what the board positioning looks like. The ant cannot slide into this region right here. See? It's stuck, can't move. So he would not be able, the ant would not be able to navigate into that square unless they were able to jump in or do something crazy like that. The second rule of moving pieces in Hive is that this is considered a hive, and you cannot break apart the hive. So what that means is that this ant right here cannot move, because once the ant leaves that spot, well, the hive is split into two. Even if the ant tries to move in a place that would reconnect the hive, no, you cannot do that. You cannot split apart the hive at any time during the game. So that's the two restrictions. Great. So how do pieces in general move? Well, let's start off with the queen bee. The queen bee is very similar to the king in another way, the king in chess in another way, in that the queen bee can move one hex in any direction. So let's say we look at black right here. Well, if black wishes to move his queen bee, black can move it here or here. And white is kind of in the same boat. Let's say white's queen bee started out here. White's queen bee can then move here or here. One hex in any direction, as long as they don't split the hive, of course. Alright, so that's cool. What about another insect? Let's look at the beetle. This is the beetle. Nice, big, fat beetle. Well, the beetle is also similar to the queen bee in that the beetle can move one space in any direction. They can move here, you can move here. But the beetle comes with a special power. The beetle can climb on top of things. So the beetle can, for example, jump up here, like that. And then the next turn, the beetle can move here, and then here, and then here, climbing on top of any insect that it wants. It can even climb up on top of another beetle that's already on top. Let's say this beetle was right here. White can have this beetle move here, and then black can move their beetle on top, like so. So that's the beetle's special ability. It can get up on top of the insect hive. And once it gets on top of the insect hive, two important things happen. The insect that it's covering cannot move. And secondly, the insect that it's on top of, well, that stack is now the beetle's color. So you look right here, the beetle just jumped up on top of the white queen, the white queen bee. This means the queen bee is no longer, this is no longer a white hex. This is now a black hex because black is the color that is on top. And that's important because there's an additional rule to deployment in that you can only put insects, new insects on the board in a place where it is touching an insect of the same color and is not touching an insect of a different color. So in subsequent turns, you can have the new insect appear here because this is a black insect. It is touching a black insect and not touching any white insects. You can put it here because now the beetle is on top of a space that is that turns it into a black hex. So the grasshopper can move there, but the grasshopper cannot deploy right here because if it deploys there, it would be touching a white insect. All right, so we've covered the beetle, can climb up on top of things. What about the grasshopper, since we were just talking about it? Well, the grasshopper can't really move in the traditional sense, but it can jump. So the grasshopper basically jumps in a straight line across as many insects until it touches a hole, a gap somewhere. So for example, you can have the grasshopper move like this. It can jump over the beetle and appear here. And then next turn, it can decide to make a really long jump from here, jump all the way over here if it wants to do that. Bing! But the one thing to note is that the grasshopper has to land in the next empty space that's available. So the grasshopper would have to jump from here and then can jump over here on the next turn instead of being able to jump boom, like that. That would just not do. So that's the grasshopper. It can jump. Pretty easy to remember. Now we have the ant. The ant, let's give a close look. The ant is kind of like the equivalent of the queen in chess. The ant can move pretty much anywhere it wants on the board. So if you want to move the ant all the way over here, great. If you want to move the ant all the way over here, great. It can move anywhere it wants. Just remember the sliding rule. So if you have like a space like this space, it can't move in because, well, it just can't slide through there. So too bad for the ant. But otherwise, the ant is basically able to move anywhere and is pretty powerful. Let's look at the spider. The spider is kind of similar to the ant, except it's a little bit weaker, and it can move 3 spaces, 3 hexes, and furthermore, it must move 3 hexes. So, it would be able to move like this. 1, 2, 3. It can move like this. 1, 2, and 3. However, what it cannot do is kind of double back on itself. So it can't move like this. 1, 2, 3. Because that would be cheating. But otherwise, it's a decently flexible piece, and if you can figure out how to use it, then it can become a pretty powerful part of your arsenal. So basically the game goes, each person takes their turn back and forth until somebody's queen bee is completely surrounded. Whoever's queen bee is completely surrounded, like say black's queen bee right here, then loses. The only other thing to note is when you're putting pieces out, you have to put the queen bee by the 4th turn. The queen bee has to be one of the first 4 pieces that you deploy. And for a little strategy tip, most people usually bring the queen bee out second. But other than that, that would be Hive in a nutshell, and hopefully you can see why I called it insect chess. If you're interested in finding out more videos, just subscribe to the myboardgameguides.com channel, and I hope to see you next time. Hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. Alright, bye-bye.